Few figures in the Bible embody the raw force of divine judgment like Jehu. He was not merely a king, he was a man on a mission, anointed to execute God's wrath upon a corrupt dynasty. His rise was not slow or calculated, it was a storm of violence, fire, and relentless justice. Unlike David, who ruled with a heart after God, or Solomon, who sought wisdom, Jehu's legacy was one of purging wickedness. He did not negotiate, he eradicated. He did not persuade, he struck down. His story is one of swift and merciless obedience. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I have anointed you king over Israel. You shall strike down the house of Ahab, that I may avenge the blood of my servants the prophets. 2 Kings 9 verses 6-7. But was Jehu's zeal a righteous act of justice or an excess of bloodshed? What can his actions teach us about the balance between obedience and wisdom? Today, we will dive deep into Jehu's story, a king who cleansed Israel with fire and fury. Chapter 1, Jehu's calling, a warrior anointed by God. Jehu was no ordinary man, he was a commander in Israel's army, a seasoned warrior known for his relentless drive. But his destiny changed dramatically when a young prophet, sent by Elisha, arrived with a message from God. Then the prophet poured oil on Jehu's head and declared, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, I anoint you king over the Lord's people Israel. You shall strike down the house of Ahab." 2 Kings 9 verses 6-7. This moment marked Jehu's transformation from a soldier to a divine instrument of justice. He was chosen to avenge the innocent, to eradicate Ahab's wicked lineage, and to bring down the corrupt rule that had led Israel into idolatry. Unlike others who questioned their calling, Jehu acted immediately. As soon as he was anointed, he did not delay, he gathered his men, mounted his chariot, and rode toward Jezreel, where King Joram of Israel and King Ahaziah of Judah were present. His approach was so fierce that even the watchmen recognized him from a distance. The lookout reported, "The driving is like that of Jehu son of Nimshi, he drives like a madman." 2 Kings 9 verse 20. Jehu's zeal and speed made it clear, this was no ordinary transition of power. He was coming with fire and fury, ready to fulfill God's command without hesitation. As he reached Jezreel, Jehu confronted King Joram, who ruled over Israel. Joram, sensing the threat, tried to escape, but Jehu was swift and ruthless. Jehu drew his bow and shot Joram between the shoulders. The arrow pierced his heart, and he slumped down in his chariot. 2 Kings 9 verse 24. With a single arrow, Jehu executed the first phase of God's judgment. But his mission was far from over. Jezebel and the house of Ahab still remained. In the next chapter, we will witness the shocking fate of Queen Jezebel, one of the most infamous figures in biblical history. Chapter 2, The Fall of Jezebel, the Queen's Brutal End. Jezebel, the infamous queen who led Israel into idolatry, witchcraft, and bloodshed, had ruled with iron determination. But with Jehu storming toward the palace, her reign was about to come to a violent and humiliating end. As Jehu arrived in Jezreel, Jezebel, still proud and defiant, did something unexpected. She painted her eyes, arranged her hair and looked out of a window. 2 Kings 9 verse 30. Jezebel was not preparing for surrender, she was preparing for one last act of manipulation. Some believe she was trying to seduce Jehu or assert her dominance, but Jehu was unmoved. He knew his mission, to erase every remnant of Ahab's wicked dynasty. Jehu did not engage in diplomacy. Instead, he issued a single command. "Who is on my side?" "Who?" And 2 or 3 eunuchs looked down at him. "Throw her down," Jehu said. 2 Kings 9 verses 32-33. The very servants of Jezebel, recognizing Jehu's authority, turned against her. They threw her from the window, and her body was crushed under Jehu's horses. The once powerful queen, who had terrorized Israel, met an end as gruesome as the bloodshed she had caused. They went to bury her, but they found nothing except her skull, her feet and her hands. 2 Kings 9 verse 35. Just as the prophet Elijah had foretold, dogs devoured her remains, leaving behind nothing but a grim reminder of God's judgment. The cycle of corruption and idolatry was breaking, but Jehu's work was far from done. With Jezebel gone, Jehu's mission was just getting started. But his next move would shock Israel even more. Stay with us as we uncover the bloodshed that followed. Chapter 3, The Massacre of the Kings and Priests, Fire and Blood in Israel. With Jezebel dead, Jehu turned his attention to eliminating the royal bloodline of Ahab. He knew that as long as Ahab's sons remained, Israel was at risk of falling back into idolatry. Now there were 70 sons of Ahab in Samaria. So Jehu wrote letters and sent them to the rulers of the city, saying, "If you are on my side, take the heads of your master's sons and bring them to me." 2 Kings 10 verse 6. The leaders, fearing Jehu's unstoppable rise, obeyed. In one night, 70 princes were executed, their heads placed in baskets as proof of loyalty. But Jehu's purge did not stop there. He gathered all the priests and worshippers of Baal, pretending to offer them a great sacrifice. Once they were inside the temple, he gave a final, ruthless command. "Go in and kill them, let no one escape." 2 Kings 10 verse 25. Jehu's men slaughtered every Baal worshipper, turning the temple into ruins. With one swift stroke, he wiped idolatry off the map of Israel. Jehu's mission was nearly complete, but had he gone too far? In the next chapter, we explore the consequences of his relentless judgment. Chapter 4, The Limits of Jehu, an Incomplete Obedience. Jehu's purge of Baal worshippers and Ahab's lineage was merciless, swift, and absolute. He had executed kings, slaughtered priests, and torn down the strongholds of idol worship. But despite his zeal, Jehu failed to complete what God commanded. His obedience was passionate, but it was not complete. But Jehu was not careful to follow the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, which had caused Israel to sin. 2 Kings 10 verse 31. Jehu destroyed Baal, yet he left another sin intact, the golden calves that Jeroboam had established. Though he had shattered one form of idolatry, he allowed another to remain, showing that his commitment to God's will had limits. At first glance, Jehu seemed like the ideal leader, strong, fearless, devoted to God's justice. But beneath his violent zeal was a heart that still clung to compromise. He had the chance to fully restore Israel, but instead, he settled for political security over spiritual renewal. So Jehu destroyed Baal worship in Israel. However, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam. 2 Kings 10 verses 28 to 29. Jehu had been God's instrument of judgment, but he was not a man after God's heart like David. His rule was built on fear and power, not love and devotion. Because Jehu only obeyed partially, his reign, though strong, did not bring lasting peace to Israel. God granted him 4 generations on the throne, but his house eventually fell because he did not fully walk in the Lord's ways. Because you have done well in accomplishing what is right in my eyes, your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation. 2 Kings 10 verse 30. Jehu's legacy is a warning: obedience must be complete. Serving God halfway is not truly serving him at all. Zeal without full devotion leads to an unfinished mission. Jehu had the power to cleanse Israel entirely, but his compromise left the door open for future corruption. What can we learn from this? In the next moment, we will reflect on Jehu's legacy and what his story means for us today. Chapter 5, The Legacy of Jehu, Justice Without Devotion. Jehu's reign was one of fear, fire, and ruthless justice. He fulfilled God's command to purge Israel of Ahab's wicked lineage, eliminated Baal worship, and secured Israel's throne for his descendants, but his heart never fully belonged to the Lord. Jehu was not careful to keep the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam. 2 Kings 10 verse 31. His name is remembered as both a sword of divine wrath and a cautionary tale. He obeyed, but without devotion. He acted, but without full surrender. His mission was righteous, but his heart was divided. Jehu teaches us a powerful lesson: zeal for God must be accompanied by true devotion. Serving God with passion is not enough, we must also seek his heart. Obedience is essential, but partial obedience still leads to failure. Fulfilling God's commands without love can turn righteousness into cruelty. A strong start means nothing without a faithful finish. Jehu left Israel free from Ahab's corruption, but his lack of spiritual depth allowed other sins to persist. His story challenges us to ask, are we fully committed to God, or are we only serving him halfway? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. 1 Samuel 15 verse 22. Jehu burned with zeal, but true faith requires more than fire, it demands a heart fully surrendered to God. May we learn from his story and walk in both obedience and devotion. Jehu was a man of action, a king of fire and fury, but fire alone does not sustain faith. He destroyed wickedness but failed to build righteousness. He cleansed Israel but did not lead it to deeper devotion. His story remains a reminder: God calls us not only to fight against sin but to walk closely with him. Passion fades if not grounded in love and commitment. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Galatians 6 verse 9. What kind of faith are you building? Are you walking in full obedience or stopping halfway? Share your thoughts in the comments. Like, subscribe, and let's continue seeking God with both fire and faith.